We have 5 very high-level speakers from very top-notch network operators globally. Jay Turner is Vice President, Development and Operations Technology with PCCW Global. Jay, welcome. Yeah, I suppose. And then Bob Victor, he's a Senior Vice President, Product Management with Comcast Business. We heard from him earlier today. Jeremy Wubs, also we heard from this morning. He's Senior Vice President, Marketing for Bell Business Markets, of course with Bell Canada. Welcome. We have not heard yet from, but certainly familiar to the MEF world, Daniele Mancuso, Chief Marketing Solutions and Business Development Officer with TI Sparkle. Last but not least, Mehmet, Associate Fellow with Verizon. So welcome. It's a rowdy crowd. This is great. Great. So let's do it this way. I'll just let you each introduce more your roles within your organization and how you relate to MEF, and then we'll jump into it. Some of you are already known to the audience, so we can keep it brief, but we'll just go down for me. Jay.
Jay Turner, I'm Vice President of Development and Operations at PCCW Global, primarily working on a network orchestration customer or self-service application. Actually was a startup that I was part of at the founding, and then PCCW Global acquired us about 2 years ago. So prior to that, I spent 16 years at Red Hat. So my whole career has kind of been open source software and community engagement and those sorts of things. So happy to be, of course, part of MEF and being able to help kind of drive those sorts of features and functionality in the standards.
All right.
Great, thanks, Jay. Bob Victor, I introduced myself before. I run product at Comcast Business and am one of the newest MEF board members.
Thanks, Bob. Jeremy Wubs, I run all the marketing and product management for the large and mid-market segment in Canada. So what I talked about this morning on the connectivity portfolio, security, cloud, contact center, all those business lines.
Thank you. Daniele Mancuso, Chief Marketing Solutions and Business Development of Sparkle. 3 main areas of responsibility: product and service portfolio definition, strategy and business development, and then consulting and global partnership.
Mehmet from Verizon. I'm with the Enterprise Product Organization, and I deal with mainly virtual network services and deal with architecture and the standards. I represent the company in various organizations, include MEF, ETSI, and FE, and ONEP, and others. I have been actually with MEF since 2008, believe it or not. My background is really, I was a college professor, and also I dealt with various research and development organizations and startups and so on and so forth. So I'm here. Thank you.
All right, excellent. So you can see we have a diverse mix of technical and business, and of course a good global representation. So let's just jump into it. Start with, and each of you may have a response to this one, but we look at, and as we talked about enterprise network services changing dramatically in this era of cloud. So really wanted to tap you guys in terms of your discussions with enterprise customers. What are the key demands and priorities that are coming back to you? Distill that. Bob, I'll have you hold off until the others because your presentation sort of covered that, but you may want to add to it. But we'll start with the other panelists. So Jay, if you want to, top concerns you come to when you sit across from, say, a CIO.
Yeah, the big thing that I think we're seeing at PCCW Global is customers and providers are demanding more and more now. So it's no longer point-to-point or, hey, I just need a mesh and I need to transfer some data. Now they're wanting to get to all of the clouds, and they want all of them simultaneously. And now we want to move traffic back and forth between those clouds. And oh, by the way, I need, a dog and pony show over here, and I'm running, I need 100 gigs worth of video transport over on this side. So the complexity of the solutions is getting far more complicated. And then add on top of that, of course, edge computing. I mean, the explosion of devices over the past 5 to 8 years is really driving that compute resource at the edge, which results in some network topology changes and some different thinking as we approach our deployments.
All right, we'll skip Bob for now and move down. So, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'd say two areas. You know, the multi-cloud that Jay mentioned would be a big one for sure. I mean, workloads are just so much more distributed than they used to be, and you know, how do we dynamically shift the work around? And I'd say the other one I touched on a little bit earlier this morning is kind of the element of security. You know, how much can you embed in the environment from a security perspective versus the client having to overlay that or figure that out themselves. So I'd say those two things are the ones we see the most push on and from clients.
Great. Daniele?
Yeah, same in Sparkle. In the last 2 years, the evolution of the enterprise, their understanding about the cloud and their will to move to cloud is dramatically affecting the way we design network, because with the great expectations that the enterprises are having to feel free to move applications in the place they mostly feel, at the time they mostly feel, what about the network? How do you follow? How do you keep the pace? So there is also an evolution in the physical and virtual network functions. There is a process of cloudification of the network. Virtual was the first step. Cloud native is where we are going now. So basically the application can be designed with the network around, and when you move the application, the network is moving and is able to work both on-prem, in hybrid cloud, and in public cloud without making difference. Also, the taxonomy of the request coming from the enterprise is really increasing, as well as the related complexity. Consider that there are enterprises that are really growing their skills with the cloud. So there are requests that treat us as a dumb pipe, just give me connectivity, I will do everything myself, to the complete opposite, that is, I want a fully managed services, both from the corporate IT point of view and the connectivity and the security. So that complexity has to be managed somewhere.
Okay, and Mehmet,
Sure.
anything different?
I think Daniel summarized pretty well. What I would add is I look at it a little bit differently. I would say two fundamental points. One is the virtualization, which is really cloudification, as Daniel mentioned. The other one is actually you want that for automation. Mainly the idea is to automate. Yes. Automate, automate, automate. How do I automate my service orders? How do I automate my on-demand modifications? Of course, the security and everything else. And in a very quick turnaround, that is the key in my mind. So all other factors coming in my mind to at the end is the automation. That's what we're trying to drive.
All right, and Bob, I don't know if you have something to add based on...
Well, you know, in general, based on the overall, discussions we've had, I couldn't agree more with Mehmet. It's automation. How do you, instead of just sending alerts or just doing things manually or getting more information, how do you take all of that out and how do you automate? And that probably tackles customers' other big request, which is simplify. I mean, if you automate almost by definition, it's simplified. It puts more pressure on the carriers and on the MEF and on people like us who are developing standards and interfaces to manage the complexity on behalf of customers. But I couldn't agree more that automation is certainly the longer-term vision.
Interesting. So when we do surveys of operators, I think what we get back as the main requirements are very much that list you guys just gave. And so your customers are telling you to do something, and then that's becoming your priority, which is interesting, and as it should be. What I didn't do in the beginning is introduce the actual topic of the session, which is realizing the vision and how MEF fits into these things. So the idea is, here's a bunch of challenges. What is MEF doing right to address those, and what are the gaps? So I want to really jump into so for every topic we'll go through, we'll kind of come back to how MEF applies and what's being done. So that's the second topic is how is the MEF 3.0 work that we've heard a bit about this morning helping to fill what is clearly not just customer needs, but your own needs for your own networks, and they seem quite tightly coupled. Daniele, I know you've got a great deal of experience with the MEF, so maybe start with you in terms of what particular work from MEF 3.0 is applying to meet these demands, and then we'll open it up to others as well.
Well, following from what I said about the requests coming around multi-cloud, and if you recall the presentation from Nan in the morning, the essential thing is certification, service description, and standardization. Now, service description is important because in this interconnected world, we need to be sure that whenever I'm buying services from Bell Canada, there is a full correspondence from the performance, the characteristics of the service that I'm giving to the final customer, and what I buy from Bell Canada to serve the requirements coming from the final customer. That's an important point. Second point is the interaction that there is between the overlay part of the network with the related underlay. So if we want to be sure that final customer can have a set of connectivity that are fully application aware and therefore can route different streams, different flows to the related underlay connections, everything must work as a Swiss clock. SD-WAN overlay has to be certified and be correspondent and respondent to the requirements, as well as the 3 pillars underground needs to be certified and really ready to respond to the requirement of the overlay. So it doesn't matter whether you are routing, well, over the internet for sure, but whether you are routing over an optical network, over an IP MPLS network, over a carrier Ethernet to network, everything needs to be MEF 3.0 certified. So this, for me, is of paramount importance, and until we don't get there, we are not fully compliant with the requirements coming from the service, from the
All right. Anyone else in terms of MEF 3.0 work that's applicably applies to today for these goals?
So let's look at what we do in MEF, right? What we do is first we define the service architectures and then define the service attributes. Architecture is why architecture is important, because you have to know what to configure, what to manage. If you don't define interfaces, if you don't define the connectivity and other components, then you don't know what to manage. So therefore, the architecture is crucial. So there, of course, the service descriptions, which is the attributes, so that you know what functionalities that you need to support. So next step, what we do is we look at the APIs. APIs becoming so crucial, as we will go into maybe later on, is how we talk to each other and how we actually automate the services and things like that. Then what we do, we also certify. Why we certify? Because we want to undercover any kind of implementation issues, any kind of interoperability issues. So actually at the end is to make the automation smoother and quicker. So that's how I look at really what we do as an MEF and how we contribute to the industry.
Okay.
I would add one bit there about the APIs. I think a very important task of MEF is that community engagement piece. Mm-hmm. You know, an API, it's a chicken and egg. API is pointless without users, and users aren't going to engage without some sort of common API. So that really feels important to me in this work.
So when we look at the APIs, and this is a MEF savvy room, so I think people are familiar, at least with the names of the different ones, Sonata, Interlude, Presto, Adagio, Cantata, maybe some other ones.
Allegro.
What, of the API work, what is the highest priority and maybe secondary in terms of timeline, and like, this is what we got to get done and why? Anyone want to take a shot at? Go ahead.
Yes, I can take, because I deal with this daily basis. So certainly 2 interfaces are crucial for us. That is the Sonata interface and Interlude interface. Why it is important? Mm-hmm. Because that's the way those interfaces allows us to talk to each other as operators. Other interfaces, interfaces like Legato interface, the Presto interfaces, Adagio interfaces, and then on the user interface, they are somewhat internal. Now, you can argue with me on the Allegro and the Cantata interfaces, but nevertheless, those are internal. So to me, priorities are Sonata interface for the service ordering and interlude for the on-demand modification of the services.
Fully agree with Mehmet. In general terms, I would say that whatever is east-to-west automation is of fundamental importance. It's a multi-perspective statement. I mean, for sure, having a fully automated interaction with your partners constituting the ecosystem is creating a lot of efficiencies in the fulfillment process. Either you implement a quote to feasibility and then you pass in phase 2 to a quote to order, and then if you have the full stack of automation, you are able also to do quote to cash, but still efficiency on the fulfillment and therefore time to market is of paramount importance. Second, because if we aim also to create new revenue streams, let's say that those that will be ready first will probably be able to generate more demand, and since they are able to satisfy the demand in a fastest and certified way, they will probably get more pieces of the cake.
I've got a follow-up, but does anyone want to add to those comments on the APIs? So it looks like it's the carrier to carrier that's critical. Within carrier, there's a set, but those become secondary because internally you can always fight your way to accomplish whatever interoperability ultimately you need. It's important, but carrier to carrier. For the panel, just to build on that, so you have the community of MEF, and then you have the industry, the world of global carriers. Are you finding that that resonates as a requirement, globally, or are you finding it's more limited to, you have this group of a couple carriers that are all going to be on board with Sonata, but you've got a non-MEF world or out there that's hesitant and that's causing a problem? Just curious, kind of the global scope and reach. Anyone want to bite at that?
I can comment on that too. When you say global, there are multiple parameters in that global space. One, you can say our telecom network providers. Then you got cloud providers. I call them as application providers, by the way.
Yep.
So now you need to somehow tie them together, which I will talk tomorrow as well on my call. If you want to have global ecosystem work together, you need to have those integration between the telecom providers and the cloud provider. That's at least a minimal thing that I believe needs to happen in order for us to move forward to really to complete the digitalization, the concept, or I would say whatever the vision that we have to implement it at the end.
Yeah, I agree with Mehmet. Like, I think what we define as global is outside the telecom world. It's a combination of the hyperscalers and other platforms and workloads that the enterprise look for, and you have to knit those fabrics together, in a way that's orchestrated and simple, and I think that's what our clients are leaning in and asking for. They're saying, I've got a lot of complexity and workloads, and they're distributed all over my enterprise, and some I don't even know how they're managed and delivered, and if you can simplify and bring that into a per-use cloud-like model, whether it sits in the network or the cloud proper, that doesn't really matter, as long as you've simplified it and followed a set of standards that can give me predictability and reliability.
Right, and I think that was echoed by PCCW in the morning keynotes about the need to bring the cloud community in, which is a very good point. It's not just telecom operators.
And I'm hoping that the cloud providers will be the carrot that can help kind of get some of these people to move across the line. I mean, it's, selling standards is hard, and getting people to invest in that. But if that's the gateway to get to the clouds, then there's a treat at the end of the road for them.
I mean, it's really, it's kind of obvious. cloud providers, software providers are all global scale businesses, and we as service providers tend to be local scale businesses. Our businesses, get scale in the local area we're in, and so we need to provide global connectivity. The only way we can possibly do that is through partners. So if there's a service provider that thinks it kind of can sit outside of that ecosystem, it's going to lose to other service providers who have local scale who decide to be part of that ecosystem. So I think there's no question it's going to move that way from a service provider perspective.
Yeah, fully agree. And this is more true in the moment that cloud providers are not staying just in the central data centers, but they are moving profoundly to the edge. So there is this process of, let's say, moving regions from the north hemisphere of the planet to the southern, but also to move much closer to the customer. So the number of cloud sites, in a way, is increasing, and you need to keep pace with the scale, because once they move fast, and they move in a really hyperscale way.
Do you find for the panel, we talked about the needs of the enterprise and what your needs are, and you guys are pretty closely tied in those. Are you finding in your discussions with the cloud providers that they're largely on board when you talk about the future of federated networks and the needs for the standards and interoperability, or is this essentially at this stage a case that you need to make to them to convince them that this is important for them as well? We know why it's important, as Bob described, to the telecom, but does the cloud community understand that as well? Or where are they in their thinking?
I'd say they're warming up.
Yeah. Okay.
That's nicer than I was
No, just be transparent. I'd say they're warming up. So I think the reality is the customer is often the impetus in between us and the cloud provider to say, there's a better way to do this. So I think of our large enterprise accounts. They go, hey, why is it so hard to bring you and a cloud provider together when it should be a match made in heaven? And so I think it's warming up, and the fact that clients expect the SLAs, the performance, the orchestration as part of one solution, not two solutions from two different companies, is important, and we're moving our way there. But I'd say they're warming up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's going to have to be some consumer pressure there. In the cloud game, there are a couple of 800-pound gorillas, and you go and start talking to them about standards, and they go, "I've got customers coming to me every day. Why should I go the extra effort there?" I think the consumer is going to have to start putting pressure on there about those sorts of things that Jeremy just mentioned about the consistency, the SLA, single point of view of the network.
Yeah, I don't think they get it at all, and I don't think they're necessarily wrong. I mean, from their perspective, the world is global scale today, and their businesses are growing quite well, so there's a little bit like, show me. But I think, I think they would also say, I mean, how many people here, I mean, we talk about, look, in the data center moving to general purpose computing, how many people here carry a general purpose computer with them? No one? I mean, I think everyone, has a general purpose computer, which is called their phone.
Yes,
right?
Definitely.
And, you think about the way the world's going and the way that our enterprise customers want the world to go, which is every single endpoint on their network, every single thing and every single person is going to be a general purpose computer that's going to interact with the cloud. And the cloud providers will say, look, you guys take care of the connectivity. And in some ways, we're doing that. And so the challenge for us is going to be, and I think there's a compelling case for it, how do we create so much value among us that they're just going to tie into our APIs because it's going to allow them to provide their services first? I think, as you said, it's a little bit chicken and the egg. But I think we're going to have to demonstrate the value as opposed to have the cloud providers come and ask for it and sign on quickly.
Interesting. Yeah, Mehmet, you wanted to add something?
I want to pinpoint to Bob's point. Bob's point is very crucial. The way I look at it is, if they need us, they will work with us. If they don't need us, they won't work with us. It's as simple as that. So, as probably most of you know, I lead the cloud service architecture work in the MEF. And I was asked this question many, many times. What happened? Why? Where is the cloud service providers or cloud providers? Why they are not joining you? And actually, I know one of the key players wanted to join, work with me. But somehow, back and forth, they didn't become a member of MEF. But at the end, I think the key driver is the business, how much business we bring to them, and maybe that will drive them to work with us in the coming days.
All right.
I don't think
go
enough
ahead,
critical
Jeremy.
workloads have tipped.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at the clients, and we have like the, you know, whether it's the Azure platform or GCP or AWS, like they're being used by clients, but not the critical workloads, the things that are latency sensitive, require the SLAs. So I think that tip has to occur. Once you see more of that occurring, okay, well then there's a more compelling reason, you know, for the cloud providers to.
That's a very important point. And by the way, just to reassure the audience that this is a serious topic that is at the attention of the board. Yesterday we discussed extensively for almost 1.5 hours about this topic here. Again, the issue of the critical applications is crucial. Traditionally, cloud providers prefer to work via the internet, but more and more we have revenue streams that are coming from Cloud Connect services. So in the moment we will be able to demonstrate that for enterprise customer, that is where money are, Cloud Connect becomes even more crucial and becomes more crucial in the moment that they scale to Cloud Edge, then they will be willing to work with us. It's clear that it's a serious issue for them. Going back to the topic of Mehmet, they have implemented a hell of automation inside their premises. So we shouldn't go there and say, hey guys, we have developed the MEF APIs, throw away whatever you have done. So they need to keep the development that they have done inside. They need just to adapt to the way they interoperate with us. That's the key point.
All right. Yeah, we appear to hit on an important topic. We could probably spend another hour, as you guys spent apparently yesterday, but I want to cover some other things, and then maybe we can come back to this if we want in the closing comments. Certification. So we talked about the APIs, and then the other big piece of MEF work is on certification. So jumping into the SD-WAN topic and the SD-WAN certification and standardization, what are the main benefits to the service providers in doing that? And then maybe also what are the main benefits to, of course, your customers in SD-WAN specific certification and standards? Bob, since you kicked off the SD-WAN presentation earlier, maybe start with you.
No, I think I talked about that. It's to allow service providers to get scale. If all of the SD-WAN platforms are different, it's really hard for us to support many of them. To the extent that we can get them into a common framework, it's to benefit them all in terms of us being able to reduce our costs, to become more efficient, and then pass those costs off to enterprises who then will adopt more quickly. The larger, you might say, well, that might work for the smaller guys who aren't supported, but how about the larger players who are supported? And for them, I feel they're getting scale, and the advantage to them is it allows all service providers across the world to work for them. So I think it's really around scale and efficiency.
Okay. Anyone want to add to value of certification?
I just say the same. Like I always think 3 buckets of scale, efficiency and then quality becomes the other one, right? Like if you're, standards allow for a certain level of quality to be maintained through everything you deliver, right? And I think we don't want to lose sight of, there's experienced people that are developing standards and have a framework around them. So it not only gets to the items Bob mentioned, but it ensures a certain level of quality in everything that's done.
Let's not forget that before MEF19, there was not even a rigorous definition of SD-WAN.
Right.
So if we start from this, I think we have said, we have talked about everything. Now we are moving to 70.1, where we are defining application security. So I think the work of MEF has been amazing around SD-WAN, and we are proceeding at full speed, helping both service providers, but also helping enterprises, because since there was not even the definition, enterprises did not know what to request to service providers when was coming to an RFI or an RFP related to SD-WAN services.
To be devil's advocate just a bit on this, so if all the operators buy in and everybody certifies their SD-WAN services, do they do they not become a commodity and then, you guys are kind of left out in the cold and maybe somebody else is going to derive the value? Is that a worry or a risk, or do the benefits outweigh? Mehmet?
Let me comment on that, because a similar question has been asked not just for SD-WAN, but for other standards.
For almost any standard.
Right, it's
really,
a common question really. Is, well, what happens if everybody develops standards products? Okay, what is my really differentiation? What am I going to do? My view is standards provide the common framework for you. Yeah. You can also, you can innovate further. You can develop additional functionalities. Nobody can tell you not to do it. So, and then you can provide your needs. So in my mind, is the same thing goes for the SD-WAN. I think it's great to have a common ground for all of us we can use and manage and move forward with it.
Certainly it was a success with carrier Ethernet, so it's mapping that to SD-WAN. Yeah. Did anyone else want to comment on that?
I think, look, I think standards are a piece of the puzzle. If you think about any kind of, say, food standards, look, if foods were certified to be safe, you could say that can make commoditized food, but, maybe more people would, buy a milk that was certified as opposed to risk becoming ill. There's different ways to differentiate and compete beyond the standards. And standards really, I think what we're trying to do is really drive adoption. And right now, the challenge and the curve for SD-WAN is how do you get up the adoption curve? If we can do that, we as service providers can support more platforms and more customers. Customers can derive more value, and we'll be on to the next level. And at some point, convince the cloud providers to jump into the ecosystem and add value there. I mean, I think it's really in everyone's interest.
This is an interesting topic that comes up quite a bit around SD-WAN. So beyond the certification for SD-WAN standardization, what else is needed? And in past discussions, this seems to be a very controversial discussion point. Should things be standard? Should they not? I'm curious for this panel, where the most important things beyond to certify, what to standardize, and then maybe, what should we keep completely off limits because it's just a bad idea.
So first of all,
and then I guess
first of all, the standardization is not complete yet, right? What we have done so far is we just did 70.1, trying to define the architectural framework and then attributes and things like that. And of course, we're looking at the APIs, but the APIs at the Presto level, we need to go back and look at the Sonata interface for SD-WAN.
Okay.
Now, interlude is going to be complicated, I know for a fact. But we should look at it. Maybe we'll find a solution for that because of this bookended solution of the SD-WAN structure. So the standardization is not completed yet. We got to complete those. And of course, we need to look at the user interfaces and things like that. So at least with the APIs and so on and so forth, at least we will bring to the same level that we have with the MEF services. Now, the issue is not just for the SD-WAN. It is more cloud services that we're going to follow hopefully beyond SD-WAN. SD-WAN is just one of the virtualized services. There are so many of them. Yeah. We need to define those new services. We need to create the infrastructure we have, which we're trying to do in the cloud service architectures, so that actually industry will be able to move forward and we can use those services, in the coming days or coming years.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think.
I'd step back and say, I think the standards are about what really good looks like. So, what does it really good look like from a carrier Ethernet underlay perspective? What does really good look like from an SD-WAN perspective, from an orchestration perspective, and from an interface perspective? So, it helps define what really good looks like, and we should all be aspiring to be really good. But we all have markets to manage and to run, and clients to win. So, then now it's up to us to go above really good and go to the next kind of level to add the features and functionalities we want. But we should all be aspiring to be really good at creating the right services, the right orchestration, doing it with quality, reliability, and the standards help drive that, right? So I just sort of think of it and frame it that way to say you have to do that. To be in this business, you have to be really good. Let's all be really good, and then figure out how we differentiate on top of it.
Yeah, I fully agree. I would just add interoperability. Because interoperability, multi-vendor characteristics becomes critical for a service like SD-WAN.
At what level interoperability? Vendor interoperability among different suppliers? This is where it becomes the
at least you should be sure that if you leave, let's say, one domain that is vendor-based, and you go to another domain that is another vendor-based, in the interconnection points, you can have a full interoperability and you don't lose part of the services. The optimum, of course, would be that whatever box and virtual gateway you choose, it can interoperate in a broad ecosystem, but that is, I believe, very far in the future and not even sure whether we will get there.
Right, right. Good. Anyone to add on this? Let's switch gears. I know we've only got a few minutes left. Let me switch gears a bit. So, kind of stepping up again, or back up to the MEF 3.0 kind of mandate holistically. If anybody wants to address particular early success stories, I know it's been about, I guess, 2 years of MEF 3.0, but we had talked, Daniele, about some early success that you're seeing along the roadmap, so maybe take that, and if anybody else has one.
Yeah, basically we have a success story just around an SD-WAN tender, quite, I would say, quite complex, that we have been awarded as Telecom Italia Group, so TIM for the Italian domestic part and Sparkle from the global connectivity. I believe it's the first transcontinental SD-WAN project that is being awarded. It's a very well-known Italian food industry. I cannot disclose the name because we don't have the liberatory. But it's a very interesting project because it's a mix of everything that we have discussed in this panel. I mean, there is one headquarter which is located in Italy. There are more than, I think, 40 branch offices that are distributed around the world, most of them in Europe, some of them in US, Russia, and Singapore. There is a strict requirement of embedded security into the SD-WAN proposition. There is the need to interconnect also with the two cloud providers, AWS and Azure. What else? It's a fully outsourced solution. So the customer didn't want to deal with the complexity, and therefore is a fully managed solution from the operator's point of view. This is one of those projects when you feel, when you are participating to the bid, that certification is important. And if MEF70 and MEF70.1 would have been ready, or let's say even more full of details, for sure the participation to the tender would have been easier. Also from the customer perspective, they know that there are SDOs that are working around the certification, around the standardization of the service, and they are eager to understand how to deal with those problems, because this would drive their internal IT and network department to interface in a more structured and, I would say, aware way with the service providers. And also to code an RFI in a very structured and well-defined way.
All right. Jeremy, I'm curious from your presentation with the virtualized network services, you talked about the rollout. How much of the MEF 3.0 played into that, or is that more future-looking where that work
I'd say some of the principles did. I mean, we started, VNS 2 years ago.
Okay.
So, when we said we launched it last year, it was probably a year and a half really before that.
Okay.
We started the kind of the concept and the planning around it. So I'd say they're aligned with the frameworks and principles, not necessarily fully adopted yet, because we started a little bit early on those things. So I mean, we've got teams, both professional services teams that are starting some of the training around SD-WAN certification, and then obviously we've got a long history, Bell, working closely with the MEF, and have folks working from areas like carrier Ethernet and all the way up through SD-WAN and other areas. So we're closely embedded, but not on all the standards yet. Working towards it. Right. Yeah.
All right. Let me. Does anyone have a very brief, like a 30-second case study, or because we're about 5 minutes. I wanted to. just get some closing thoughts from each of you. Kind of framed it around what do you see as the single most important aspect of MEF 3.0 for your future, work at your company, and we can frame it either something that's ongoing that you're going to adopt, or if you want to frame it as a call to action, as this is where MEF needs to get more involved, take it that way. But we'll just go right down the line. Start with you, Jay. Single most important, kind of a 1 minute.
Yeah. It probably dovetails on some of the stuff I've already said. Education and adoption throughout the industry. To justify the work that I need my team to do, I need to be able to show some outcome of that, and I need to show, need and demand within the industry. And so, education and adoption are how I get there.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, maybe I'll cheat and say there's two. I mean, I would say near term, it's standardization so that we can scale. We want to, early on, it's critical that every single one of our deployments and every single one of our customers are really thrilled with the quality of service we're providing. And so just getting standardization that allows us to support more and more platforms in a quality way is key. And then longer term, I think it really is around automation. How can we drive costs out of the ecosystem so that we can help our customers do more? And particularly, I would say Jeremy's vision is spot on, and I think one that's shared by many service providers, which is how do you replace proprietary hardware and lots of individual services with VNFs, and getting scale and getting control over that UCPE and driving automation, and that's going to be critical.
All right, excellent. Jeremy?
Yeah, I'd build off what Bob said and just sort of add the element of, I think the inner working is absolutely critical. Like our customers expect things, obviously in the paradigm Bob mentioned, with scale and quality, but they're also expecting it to be expanded on a global basis. So I think that's a critical element that needs.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I guess for you, well, for all three of you, so the comments you make, are those specific to SD-WAN, or you're talking more broadly about just our services that generally?
Well, I think SD-WAN is probably the right entry point. Like when I think of virtual network services, it sort of becomes a catalog. Right. SD-WAN's in there, security's in there, access to the cloud.
Yeah, SD-WAN is like the first virtual network service.
Yeah.
And,
right. Yeah. Right. Daniele?
Yeah, being Sparkle global network, almost operating without access, basically we are mainly a transit provider. So for us, the most critical, I would say, that is the broadest adoption of the East-West. So Sonata extension also to other services. SD-WAN, as Mehmet said, we need to go back to Sonata to understand how to do, but also to imagine Sonata also for layer 1 services, and to complete the three pillars of the underlay. So MEF 3.0, carrier Ethernet, MEF 3.0, IP MPLS, MEF 3.0, optical networks. That's paramount importance.
All right, and last word to
Mehmet. Basically, everybody really touched the points, but from Verizon perspective, Verizon has presence in the 150 countries and employees in the 75 countries. So given that, we are in some sense really kind of desperate to inner working. So therefore, the APIs are very crucial. Of course, the standardization of the services. Again, we are still not far enough with just SD-WAN we have defined so far. Virtualized services is far more than just SD-WAN, and hopefully we finish the cloud service architecture and we start to define the new virtualized services standardization.
And would you say, is MEF, for this API work, is MEF the primary body that would take this on?
That's a very good question. No, it's not.
And we've only got a minute, but
No, it's not, but here is the differences. There's certainly IETF is working on that. There are a lot of other standard bodies are working on that, the TMF working on that, and so on and so forth. But the MEF is the only STO deals with the end-to-end service standardization. That is the fundamental difference between us and other STOs.
All right. I think we are pretty much out of time, so we'll close there. But I want to thank our panelists. I learned a lot. Hopefully you guys did as well. Thank you very much.